Say aye. Mr. Chambliss, aye. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mr. Graham, aye. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray. Aye. Mr. Begich. Mr. Begich. Aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer. Aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow. Aye. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. Aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman. Aye. Mr. Reed of Nevada. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye.
Are there any senators wishing to vote or wishing to change their vote? If not, the ayes are 96, the nays are 0. The nomination is confirmed. Under the previous order, the question is on the Ellis nomination. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The nomination is confirmed.
President, move to reconsider.
Under the previous order, the motions to reconsider are considered made and laid upon the table. The President will be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate will resume legislative session. The Senator from California.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the period of morning business for debate only be extended to 7:30 p.m. and that all provisions of the previous order remain in effect. And I would ask that I may be recognized for as much time as I might consume.
Without objection.
Mr. President, thank you so very much. I think we are all in a state of shock that we are entering the fourth day of a government shutdown, or we've completed it, and no movement in sight. And I wanted to go home to California and see how the Affordable Care Act is going in California, since that's the reason the Republicans have shut down the government. And I want to report to you that people there cannot understand why on earth the Republicans want to stop the Affordable Care Act. They can't believe, just as Californians are on the brink of getting millions of our citizens insured, and small businesses getting affordable health insurance under the Affordable Care Act, that Republicans are, frankly, not only have they shut down the government, but they're threatening default. And that default, they understand, would lead to economic chaos. It's never happened before in American history. Well, I tried to explain to my constituents exactly what's been going on here. And I did it in the best way that I could, and I think I was fair. I said, the first thing they said, in order to keep the government open for 6 weeks, they wanted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And of course, they tried 43 times. That never worked, so that didn't work. Then they said, well, they would defund it, which, as everybody understands, if you don't fund it, it's the same thing. But we told them they couldn't defund most of it because most of it is not appropriated funds. They didn't care. They put that forward. That went nowhere. Then they said, oh, we won't repeal it or defund it. We'll delay the Affordable Health Care Act. And we all said, if you think we're going to delay further the chance for millions of Americans to get affordable insurance, we're not going to do it. This bill passed 3.5 years ago. It was upheld by the Supreme Court. That's just not going to happen. And so then they said, well, we'll just take part of it and stop part of it. We won't allow women to get preventive services. Well, that went over like a lead balloon. Their war on women again. They were saying, oh, women won't be able to get tested for cervical cancer, for STDs, for pregnancy-related diabetes. Oh, we're just going to shut that part of the Affordable Care Act down. And women here in the Senate held a press conference and they dropped that. Then they said, okay, we're going to repeal one of the revenue streams, and that's going to cost $30 billion, but we have no way to replace it. So then they actually sent us a provision that would have added $30 billion to the deficit. This is from the Republican Party. They say they're so fiscally conservative. They actually sent us a provision that would cost $30 billion with no way to pay for it, so that didn't go down too well. And then the pièce de résistance they sent us. Now this one's really beautiful. They say that our staff and the staff of anyone working in the White House, all these people who believe so much in giving back to their great country, that they will no longer get an employer contribution that all Americans get who work for large employers. That's their great thank you to their staff. That's their great show of appreciation, besides shutting down the government, where their staff is working without pay. So I explain this to my constituents who are trying to sign up for health care. I went to a really good community health care center where people are lining up and getting information, and they will be signing up for health care. I tried to explain all this, and they said, well, why would they do this? I said, well, there's more bad news. We thought that they would extend the debt ceiling, which is the way you pay for the debts that you have already incurred. It's already on the credit card. We now need to pay for that. And now they're threatening not to pay the bills of the United States of America. They're threatening to take this country into default. And now they're saying, well, maybe we won't do it if we can cut Medicare and Medicaid. So now they've put the Affordable Care Act on the line. They've put Medicare on the line, Medicaid on the line. Social Security is out there. And they may cause a default if we don't deal with these programs that are so critical to our people. Now, I got to say, I've been around here a long time, and I know we have differences, but the President is right when he says, we, the Congress, have two things we have to do. One of them is we have to keep the doors open because we've passed laws, and they need to be carried out. Keep the government open. And the second thing we have to do is pay our bills that we incurred, raise the debt ceiling. And so far, the Republicans refuse. Now, we have sent a clean, continuing resolution over there without all this cutting health care, Medicare, Social Security that they are interested in. No, we say, let's just keep the government open and going for 6 weeks. Let's raise the debt ceiling, and then, of course, we'll talk about all of this. That's what we do here. We negotiate, we talk. And the President is more than willing to do it. He offered the Republicans a $4 trillion deficit reduction deal. They walked away. He's willing to talk about everything and anything. But you got to keep the government going, and you got to pay your bills. That's the fundamental work that we have to do. Now, the irony, of course, is we get our checks, but our staff, they don't get their check. The workers who come back because they're deemed essential, they are working without getting their pay. This is an outrage. And Speaker Boehner, all you have to do is put the continuing resolution on the floor for an up or down vote. Every Democrat will vote for it, and last count, the newspapers say at least 21 Republicans. Open up the government. We're knocking on the door. Open it up. Guess what you'll find behind the door? People who want to work and people who need a paycheck. Now, I have to tell you, they passed a bill that says they're going to pay federal workers after the shutdown, and that's good. They should have done that. But right now, we hear Republicans over here who said they don't really think that's a great idea. And I have a better idea than even that. Open up the government and pay people for doing the jobs they were hired to do. I have a ranking member who has asked for a big hearing on climate change, and he wants all the administration officials to show up. We were planning on that. But most of them have absolutely no staff, and they are responding to emergencies. If there's a chemical explosion, the Chemical Safety Board has to respond. If there's a horrible coal ash spill, the EPA will have to respond. If there's a disastrous cancer hotspot, the EPA will have to respond. Open up the government. Don't just say to people, you'll get paid so you don't have to bother coming to work. Open up the government. Let people work for the pay they're supposed to get. This is an outrage. You know, I have to say, when they passed over there, pay the workers, we know why they did it. It was political. Because the heat in Virginia is so hot in this gubernatorial race. Even the far-right Republican over there said, open up the government and fight about health care later. So I have to say, when I went home and I saw people waiting to sign up for convened.com, and I learned that on the first day, Mr. President, Covered California had 5 million hits and 500,000 distinct users. 17,000 people called Covered California's telephone service centers, and over 6,000 Californians began to sign up on the first day. On the second day, they had 200,000 distinct users. They are training thousands of enrollment counselors there. Many of them are already insurance agents. Many of them are going to work for big providers like Kaiser Permanente. And many of them are going to be in the community health care centers. Why do the Republicans want to shut down the government, threaten default of this nation, when we're on the brink of getting millions of people the health insurance they need and deserve, and the small business community is going to really have an opportunity to get better rates and better tax breaks? Now, I want to talk a little bit about this threat of default, because the threat of default is real. So let's start off, go through a couple of charts. First of all, you've got a new thing here going on. Senator from Oklahoma today, the junior senator, said, oh, you don't default if you don't pay people what they're owed, only if you default on interest payments. All of a sudden, there's a new definition. But if you don't pay Social Security, he doesn't consider it a default. If you don't pay for Medicare, he doesn't consider it a default. If you don't pay contractors, he doesn't consider it a default. Why don't we go to Black's Law Dictionary? Default, the failure to make a payment when due. And let's be clear, there isn't one bill that's coming due that Congress didn't pass. Let's be clear. Congress makes the decisions on spending. You default when you fail to make a payment when due. And they are playing, as Jack Lew said, the Treasury Secretary, with fire here. With fire. Let's see what has been said about default. And default means you fail to raise the debt ceiling in order to accommodate the bills you have already incurred. Ronald Reagan, the hero of the Republican Party. The full consequences of a default, or even the serious prospect of a default by the United States, are impossible to predict and awesome to contemplate. Denigration of the full faith and credit of the United States would have substantial effects on the domestic financial markets and the value of the dollar. Ronald Reagan said that in 1983. Why don't the Republicans listen to their hero? He said even the thought of a default was dangerous for this nation. And the last time they played these games, it cost billions of dollars because we were downgraded. Now let's look at Douglas Holtz-Eakin, CBO director under George W. Bush, talking about default. It's a bad idea. Little defaults, big defaults. Default's a bad idea, period. And there should be no one who believes otherwise. Now, if they don't listen to Ronald Reagan, why don't they listen to the CBO director under George W. Bush? I'm telling you, these guys are in the fringes. They're in the fringe lane, they're in the far right, and they're going to go off the road. And if it was just them, it would be one thing, but they're taking America with them. And we have to stand up and be counted around here and not let this go without comment. Mark Zandi, he was John McCain's economic advisor. This is what he said. The dark scenario is so dark, I can't imagine it. He's talking about a default. And Speaker Boehner standing there saying, well, despite the fact that you read that I didn't want a default, I can't contemplate approving this without figuring out how to cut entitlement programs like Medicare and Social Security. I got to tell you, they're playing with fire. I think they've lit the match. Anyone who knows anything about economics, I happened to major in it in college, and I was a stockbroker for a period of time, knows uncertainty is the worst thing. Uncertainty is the worst thing. The last time the Republicans tried this, and eventually they decided to back up and back off, it cost us, as I was saying, almost $19 billion over 10 years in taxpayer costs. America's credit rating was downgraded. Standard & Poor's downgraded the U.S. credit rating for the first time in American history, and the stock market sank. It dropped 2,000 points in July and August of 2011. That's a wonderful policy, Republicans. Just keep it up. Keep it up. I mean, who do you think you're helping? Who do you think you're helping? People who have 401ks? Everyone in America who's counting on the certainty of a government opening up every day in the greatest nation in the world? What are they accomplishing? The president had to cancel a trip to Asia that was so anticipated, giving China the upper hand there? You have got to be kidding. Who are you helping? Who are you helping? So here's the deal. We've got a health care program now called the Affordable Care Act. I'll tell you the story of Leslie Foster, a 28-year-old freelance filmmaker in Hollywood. He told the Wall Street Journal, Leslie Foster, that he found a plan on Covered California that will cost him only $62 a month. Because he earns $20,000 a year, federal assistance will pick up 3/4 of the cost of his premium. Leslie says he hasn't had health insurance, comprehensive health insurance, since 2006. I went home to be with the real people, to see the good that we can do. Is the Affordable Care Act perfect? No. Can we fix it? Yes. Let's talk about it. But don't try to scuttle a law that is so important for the people of my state and for this country. 48 million people who are uninsured in America today. They have a shot at getting insurance for the first time. Don't take it away, and don't threaten default, and don't shut down this government, which you already did. Open it up. They actually, the more I think about it, they pass a law to pay federal employees who are sitting home. Tell me how that makes sense. They want to come to work and do their job. They're not happy sitting home, whether they get a check or they don't. Open up the government. If you don't like certain functions, fight it out during the regular order. Patty Murray, the chairman of our Budget Committee, she's asked, I think it's now 18 times, I could be wrong, and I'll correct the record if I'm wrong. She's asked them to go to conference and strike a deal. Let's sit down and talk. Senator Cruz objected every time, and when he wasn't here, Senator Lee objected. The far-right wing does not want to solve this problem because they like the chaos. I don't know why. They ought to say it to Andrew Stryker. He's 34 years old. He lives in Los Angeles. He does freelance work. He pays a monthly premium of around $600 to stay on the plan from the job he left 4 years ago. He has high blood pressure and says he's been denied coverage in the past due to a pre-existing condition. Last Tuesday, Andrew told the Washington Post he picked out a silver plan on the covered California exchange. While it took him a while to sign up for coverage due to traffic and high demand on day one, he said, "It will save me over $6,000. For that, I would have waited all day." Now, I think the Republicans should call up Mr. Stryker and say, too bad, too bad. You don't mind if we delay this another few years, do you? And he'd say, I sure would. I have a chance. Last week, San Franciscan Paul Cello told KQED he selected a plan on the California exchange that will save him more than $300 a month. That's what he pays now in the high-risk pool. He says it's a whole other world. The coverage is better, a lower premium, no pre-existing condition exclusions. I get mental health coverage, so there's way more coverage than I had, and I'm going to be saving. Why doesn't John Boehner, who is known to shed tears, call up Paul Cello and say, gee, Mr. Cello, we're really sorry. We want to delay your insurance for a year or two or forever. Where's the emotion Speaker Boehner has shown in many other cases? Where's the emotion for workers here who can't get a paycheck, who are just praying to God the Republicans will vote on that clean CR and open up this government? Look, we know we have disagreements. That's fine. We're each proud of the values that we bring. But it isn't right to shut down the government and cause so much pain. It isn't right. It isn't right to threaten default and havoc in the markets and havoc across the nation. It isn't right. They're trying to shut down the government, and they might default because they don't like Medicare, Obamacare, Social Security, and Medicaid. And they're stamping their feet. And they're throwing a tantrum. Why are they inflicting so much suffering on our workers, our families, but none on themselves? Note to the Republicans, you're protecting your pay. Give it up during this shutdown. Here in the Capitol last week, we had a very frightening incident. It happened right outside my office. We are so thankful to the Capitol Police for rushing to save the day. A vehicle was being used as a weapon. Well, they ran right to the trouble. A couple of them wound up in the hospital. They are not getting paid. What do you think that does to the ego of people, to their feeling of self-worth? And these Republicans get all the protection they want, and so do we. And this is the way we value people? Shut down the government, don't give them their pay, and by the way, then try to take away their employer contribution to their health care, which is the equivalent of a huge pay cut. Talk about values. Speaker Boehner, why don't you get a little bit of a dose of Tip O'Neill? Tip O'Neill knew the magic of 218. He didn't care whether Republicans voted, Democrats voted. He got things done. They've done nothing. When you control 1/2 of 1/3 of the government, you don't get to decide everything. It doesn't work that way. We have to work together. You don't pick and choose what laws to enforce. If you don't like them, repeal them. Try to repeal the Clean Air Act. Bring it on. Try to repeal the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Superfund Act, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Law, the Consumer Protection Agency. You don't even like Social Security. Be honest. And you don't like Medicare, and you don't like Medicaid. You want to battle that out? Bring it on. We'll battle it out. But don't hold this whole country hostage, and don't hurt millions of workers. I got to say, they pass these little mini bills. We stand on the floor, we talk about the horror stories. Oh, they pass a mini bill. I guess eventually they'll send enough bills over here to open up the whole government. Why don't they just open up the government? We cry for those people who can't get into CDC trials. I should say NIH trials. We cry for them. And they have a mini bill. But they didn't open up the CDC, and people are not working to catch the next epidemic. They didn't open up food inspections, and Lord knows we lose thousands of people a year in poisoned food. They won't open up the EPA, and we've got kids in Los Angeles as we speak, very sick, very ill, bloody noses, picture in the paper. I can show you. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know. But the red over here is bloody nose from little children who are living near an oil and gas operation. And the day I read about it, I called up the EPA. They said they'd be on it in 5 minutes. And then the government shut down. But they don't care over there. Even though 75% of the people strongly support the EPA, they want to get rid of it. Well, bring it on. But don't hold this country hostage. There's 110 FAA safety inspectors in Southern California who were furloughed, 830 Bureau of Land Management employees who were sent home, small businesses not getting paid. Do you know we don't even know what our unemployment rate is, Mr. President, in the greatest country in the world, because the Labor Department had to send home the people who calculate that number? In Santa Monica, a plane crashed on Sunday evening and 4 people were killed. The NTSB cannot investigate. That's the National Transportation Safety Board. They can't investigate it. The investigators are off the job. They took what they learned, they put it in a vault, and when the government opens, they'll take it out. In the meantime, who knows why it happened? Maybe it's a defect in the plane that we could fix for all planes. Maybe it's something on the runway. We don't know. Maybe it's pilot error. All of this needs to be discussed and looked at. I'll tell you, what they're doing is disgraceful, and it's unprecedented. I've looked back. Yes, there have been shutdowns. Most of them lasted a day or 2 or 3, but none of them were about repealing a law, let alone a signature law of a president, Democratic or Republican. The Republicans really have to wake up and smell reality. They had an election, and a lot of it was about the Affordable Care Act. They lost. Amazingly, the Affordable Care Act, they've dubbed it Obamacare, is based on a Republican idea of responsibility, individual responsibility. We actually got the idea from Republicans and from a Republican governor named Mitt Romney. But they ran away from it because they don't care for this president. Get over it. You lost. There are people in this United States Senate that are here who ran on saying that they would make the Affordable Care Act better, but they weren't going to repeal it. Now we have the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, 600 employees furloughed. The government can't regulate the markets for contracts in oil, corn, metals. Commissioner Bart Chilton said, taking our cops off the beat even for a few days, Mr. President, could have disastrous impacts on the markets and the consumers. We talked about the CDC. They're furloughed 9,000 workers who respond to outbreaks like salmonella. This at a time when an outbreak of hepatitis A has affected 79 people in California. So we are dealing with a self-inflicted wound upon this nation, a government shutdown. It is unnecessary. We cannot see this continue. So I say to Speaker Boehner, who's the architect of this shutdown, stop playing games with the lives of Americans, our workers, our families, our children. Do your job. Open up the government. Let the House vote. It's pretty simple. We have sent a bill over there which funds the government. We have committed to them that after they pass that and the debt ceiling, every single thing is on the table. You know, I was thinking the other day, if you're a teacher and you get hired in a school and the school opens for work at 9 o'clock every morning, you have to be in the classroom at 9 in the morning in order to keep your job. If you weren't in your classroom at 9 in the morning and you decided, I don't really want to show up, then I want to do something different. I want to change the rules. I don't like 9, I'd like to come in at 11. You would be fired. Well, our job is to keep the government running and to pay the bills we've incurred. We don't get to pick and choose or decide that all of a sudden in the middle of everything we're going to cancel out a law that passed 3.5 years ago. This is so bad that the Republican candidate for governor in Virginia has said, stop it, open up the government, and then debate health care. The good news is Speaker Boehner could change his mind, bring our bill up in a few minutes' time. I know how it works. I spent 10 years in the House. It's real easy. Take the bill, you go to the Rules Committee, you talk about how you're going to allow 1 or 2 amendments or none. You could actually take it up and pass it and send it to the President. And what would that do? It would reopen the government tomorrow, Mr. President. And it would keep the government open for 6 weeks while we debate the bigger issues. And then we should raise the debt ceiling and pay the bills we've already incurred. It's so good to go home to your state and talk to people who are looking at us and thinking, why would anyone want to close this country down because they don't like the fact that our families can get health insurance? They don't understand it. They're pondering it, and they're coming up with a tilt. This makes no sense. So, Speaker Boehner, you're a man. Obviously, you have deep emotions. Your policies and that of your party are hurting people, hurting children, hurting families, hurting the economy, hurting the country. And all you have to do is bring up a clean continuing resolution that we passed over here, and thanks to Republicans who allowed us to bring it up and pass it. Pass it over there. Let's get through this. Let's restore some faith that this country can function once again. I thank you, Mr. President. I would yield the floor, and I would note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. President.
The senator from California.
I ask the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent that, as if in executive session, the nomination of Arun Madhavan Kumar of California to be Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Director General of the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, received in the Senate on October 7, 2013, be jointly referred to the Committee on Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs and the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I understand there are 3 measures at the desk due for a second reading.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the second time.
H.R. 3223, an act to provide for the compensation of furloughed federal employees. H.J. Res. 75, making continuing appropriations for the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for women, infants, and children for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes. H.J. Res. 85, making continuing appropriations for the Federal Emergency Management Agency for fiscal year 2014 and for other purposes.
Mr. President, I object to any further proceedings with respect to these measures en bloc.
Objection is heard. The bills will be placed in the calendar under Rule 14.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn till 10 a.m. on Tuesday, October 8, 2013, and that following the prayer and pledge, the morning hour be deemed expired, the journal of proceedings be approved to date, and the time for the 2 leaders be reserved for their use later in the day, and that following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business for debate only until 12:30 p.m., with senators permitted to speak therein for up to 10 minutes each, and that the Senate recess from 12:30 till 2:15 to allow for the weekly caucus meetings.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, if there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that it adjourn under the previous order.
The Senate stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow.
So the Senate's gavelled out, but earlier today, members passed 2 judicial nominations for U.S. district courts in Illinois. Lawmakers also spent much of the day discussing the government shutdown, with members of both parties still searching for ways to resolve their differences over how and when to reopen the government. On Saturday, the House passed a measure that provides retroactive pay for all furloughed government workers, with senators yet to debate that bill. Follow the Senate live here on C-SPAN 2 when members gavel back in on Tuesday.
We need some fundamental overhaul of